Qur'an Chapter 1, Surah Al-Fatihah, the opening, by Sayyid Qutb. Translation by Muhammad Al-Amrani. In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Praise be to God, the sustainer of all worlds, the most merciful, the most compassionate, master of the day of judgment. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. Guide us on the straight path, the path of those who have received your grace, not the path of those who have incurred your anger, nor of those who have gone astray. A Muslim repeats this short chapter with its 7 verses 17 times a day at the minimum. More than double that if they also perform the additional prayers, and without limit if they desire to stand in voluntary prayer before their sustainer. No prayer is valid without this chapter, as reported in the 2 authentic collections from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who said, "There is no prayer for the one who does not recite the opening of the book." This chapter contains the essentials of Islamic creed, the core of the Islamic worldview, and the fundamental emotions and orientations. This points to some of the wisdom behind its repetition in every unit of prayer and the invalidity of any prayer in which it is not mentioned. The chapter begins, "In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate." While there is a debate about whether the basmala, the phrase "in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate," is a verse from every chapter or a verse from the Qur'an recited at the beginning of every chapter, it is most likely considered a verse of Surah Al-Fatihah, making its verses 7. There is also an opinion that the reference in the verse, and we have given you the 7 oft-repeated verses, and the great Qur'an refers to Surah Al-Fatihah, described as the 7 oft-repeated verses because they are repeated in prayer. Beginning in the name of God is the manner that God inspired his prophet in the first revealed verse, which states, "Read in the name of your sustainer." This aligns with the fundamental principle of the Islamic worldview that God is the first and the last, the manifest and the hidden. He is the true existence from which all existence derives, and every beginning starts from him. Hence, every beginning should be in his name, and every movement and direction should be in his name. Describing God at the beginning as the most merciful, the most compassionate encompasses all meanings of mercy in its various forms. Only he possesses the combination of these 2 attributes. He alone is described with the attribute the most merciful. While a servant might be described as compassionate, it is religiously prohibited to describe any servant with the attribute the most merciful. The combination of the 2 attributes is even more exclusive to him. Regardless of the differences in the scope of these attributes, this distinction is not essential in these reflections. What matters is that these 2 attributes together encompass all meanings of mercy in its various forms and realms. Following the beginning "in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate," comes the praise directed to God, describing him with absolute sustainership over all worlds. Praise be to God, the sustainer of all worlds. Praise to God is the feeling that overflows the believer's heart merely by mentioning God. His very existence is but a flow from the divine blessings that evoke praise and gratitude. At every moment and every step, God's blessings continue to pour and gather, overwhelming all his creation, especially humans. Thus, praising God from the beginning and the end is a foundational principle of the immediate Islamic worldview. He is God. There is no God but he. His is the praise in the first and the last. Furthermore, God's immense grace and blessings on his believing servant are such that when the servant says, "Praise be to God," it is recorded for him as a good deed that outweighs all measures. In Sunan Ibn Majah, Ibn Umar, may God be pleased with them, reported that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that a servant of God said, "O Sustainer, all praise is due to you in a manner befitting the majesty of your face and the greatness of your sovereignty." The 2 angels found it challenging and did not know how to record it. They ascended to God and said, "Our Sustainer, a servant has said something we do not know how to record." God, knowing what his servant said, asked, "What did my servant say?" They replied, "O Sustainer," he said, "all praise is due to you in a manner befitting the majesty of your face and the greatness of your sovereignty." God replied, "Record it as my servant said it until he meets me, and I will reward him for it." Praising God represents the feeling evoked in the believer just by mentioning God. As for the latter part of the verse, sustainer of all worlds, it represents a fundamental principle of the Islamic worldview, for absolute and comprehensive sustainership is one of the core tenets of the Islamic creed. The sustainer is the owner and the one who manages affairs, and in language it refers to the master and the one who manages for improvement and upbringing. Managing for improvement and upbringing encompasses all worlds, that is, all creations. God, the Exalted, did not create the universe and then abandon it. Instead, he manages it with improvement, cares for it, and nurtures it. All worlds and creations are maintained and cared for by the sustainer of all worlds. The connection between the Creator and the creations is continuous, extending and existing at all times and in all states. Absolute sustainership is the point of distinction between the clarity of complete, comprehensive monotheism and the obscurity that arises from the lack of clarity of this truth in its definitive form. Often, people combine acknowledgement of God as the sole creator of the universe with belief in multiple sustainers who control life. This may seem strange and laughable, but it has been and still exists. The Qur'an tells us about groups of polytheists who said about their various idols, "We only worship them so that they may bring us nearer to God in position," as he said about a group from the people of the book. They have taken their scholars and monks as lords besides God. The prevalent pre-Islamic beliefs in the world when Islam emerged were filled with various gods, considered small deities alongside the chief god, as they claimed. Declaring sustainership in this chapter and its comprehensive sustainership over all worlds is the point of distinction between order and chaos in belief. To direct all worlds to one sustainer, acknowledging his absolute sovereignty, and to shed the burden of diverse sustainers and the distress of confusion between various sustainers, then to reassure the conscience of these worlds to the constant care of God and his ongoing sustainership. This care never ceases, diminishes, or disappears, unlike the highest philosophical concept of Aristotle, who claimed that God created the universe and then no longer cared about it because God is above thinking about what is below him. Islam emerged in a world burdened with a heap of beliefs, conceptions, myths, philosophies, and illusions, in which truth and falsehood, the correct and the fake, religion and superstition, and philosophy and mythology are mixed. Under this massive heap, the human conscience flounders in darkness and doubts, not settling on certainty. The human conscience could not find stability in understanding this universe itself and its way of life until it found stability in its belief and perception of its God and his attributes. It needed clear, straight certainty amid this chaos, confusion, and heavy accumulation of erroneous beliefs. One cannot grasp the necessity of this stability until they see the enormity of this accumulation and navigate through the wilderness of beliefs, conceptions, myths, philosophies, illusions, and ideas that Islam encountered and addressed when it emerged. Thus, Islam's primary focus was on clarifying the matter of faith and establishing a clear perception that settles in the conscience regarding God's attributes, his relationship with his creations, and the relationship of creations with him with absolute certainty. Hence, the pure, comprehensive, and absolute monotheism that is free from any blemish or ambiguity was the foundational concept that Islam brought. Islam continuously clarified it in the conscience, addressing every thought and doubt concerning the essence of monotheism until it was purified from all obscurities, leaving it firmly rooted and untouched by any illusion in any form. Likewise, Islam decisively clarified God's attributes, especially his absolute sustainership, with such clarity. Most of the accumulation in that confusion, where philosophies, beliefs, illusions, and myths floundered, pertain to this crucial matter, which profoundly impacts the human conscience and behavior alike. The beauty, perfection, coherence, and simplicity of the profound truth represented by this faith do not become evident to the heart and mind as much as they do when reviewing the pre-Islamic accumulation of beliefs, conceptions, myths, and philosophies, especially regarding the divine truth and its relationship with the world. Then, the Islamic faith appears as a true mercy to the heart and mind, a mercy with its beauty, simplicity, clarity, coherence, closeness, intimacy, and direct, deep response to human nature. This quality, encompassing all meanings and states of mercy, is reiterated in the heart of the Surah in an independent verse to emphasize the prominent feature of this comprehensive sustainership and to establish the ongoing connection between the sustainer and his creations. It is a connection of mercy and care that evokes praise and gratitude. It is a relationship based on tranquility and affection, for praise is the natural response to tender mercy. The sustainer God in Islam does not pursue his servants as adversaries, like the gods of Olympus in their whims and outbursts, as depicted in Greek myths. Nor does he plot vengeful schemes as falsely claimed in the Old Testament myths, such as the story of the Tower of Babel in the 11th chapter of Genesis. Owner of the Day of Judgment. This represents a profound, impactful concept in all human life, the fundamental belief in the hereafter. Owner signifies the utmost degree of possession and control. The Day of Judgment is the day of recompense in the hereafter. Often people believed in God's divinity and his creation of the universe initially, but they did not believe in the day of recompense. Belief in the Day of Judgment is a fundamental aspect of Islamic faith, valuable for directing human focus and hearts to another world beyond this earthly life, preventing them from being overwhelmed by worldly necessities. When this belief is firm, people can rise above these necessities untroubled by the need to achieve recompense within their short, limited earthly lives. It is the dividing line between true human dignity, as intended by God for his servants, and the distorted, deviant images that fall short of perfection. Human life cannot align with God's exalted way unless this fundamental belief is realized in human perception, and hearts are reassured that their earthly recompense is not their final share. The short-lived individual must trust in another life worth striving and sacrificing for, relying on the reward to be received therein. Believers in the hereafter and its deniers are never equal in feelings, morals, behavior, or actions. They are two distinct categories of creation, two different natures that do not meet in actions on earth nor in recompense in the hereafter. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. This is the doctrinal principle arising from the previous concepts in the Surah. This principle declares the birth of comprehensive human freedom, freedom from servitude to illusions, systems, and circumstances. If only God is worshipped and sought for help, the human conscience is freed from subjugation to systems, circumstances, and people, as well as from the subjugation to myths, illusions, and superstitions. This reveals the Muslim stance towards human and natural forces. Regarding human forces, there are two types: guided forces that believe in God and follow his way, which must be supported and collaborated with for goodness, truth, and righteousness, and misguided forces disconnected from God and his way, which must be fought, resisted, and opposed. The Muslim should not be daunted by the enormity or might of these misguided forces. Due to their deviation from their primary source, God's power, they lose their true strength and constant sustenance that maintains their energy. Regarding natural forces, the Muslim's attitude is one of understanding and friendship, not fear and hostility. Human strength and natural forces both stem from God's will and command, are governed by his will, and are harmonious and cooperative in movement and direction. A Muslim's faith teaches that God, their sustainer, created all these forces to be friendly, helpful, and cooperative. The way to gain this friendship is through contemplation, understanding, and cooperation directed towards God, their sustainer and creator. Westerners, inheritors of Roman ignorance, often express the use of natural forces by saying conquering nature. This expression reflects the clear implications of the ignorant perspective disconnected from God and the spirit of the universe responsive to God. In contrast, the Muslim whose heart is connected to their merciful and compassionate sustainer, whose soul is connected to the spirit of this God-glorifying existence, believes in a different relationship, not one of conquest and estrangement. They believe that God, the creator of all these forces, made them according to one law to cooperate in achieving the goals assigned to them by this law. God has subjected them to humans and facilitated their discovery of their secrets and laws. Humans should thank God whenever He enables them to gain assistance from any of these forces. It is God who subjects them, not humans who conquer them. He has subjected to you whatever is in the heavens and whatever is on the earth. Thus, illusions will not fill their senses regarding natural forces, nor will fears arise between them and these forces. They believe in God alone, worship God alone, and seek help from God alone. They contemplate, understand, and become familiar with them, leading these forces to offer assistance and reveal their secrets. They live in a friendly, affectionate universe. How wonderful is the saying of the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he looked at Mount Uhud. This is a mountain that loves us, and we love it. These words encompass all the love, familiarity, and harmony the Prophet's heart, peace be upon him, held towards nature, even in its grandest and roughest forms. After establishing these foundational principles in Islamic perception and the exclusive direction to God in worship and seeking help, the Surah moves to practical application by directing a prayer to God, fitting the overall context and nature of the Surah. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those who have received your grace, not the path of those who have incurred your wrath, nor those who have gone astray. Guide us to the straight path. Guide us to know the right path and to stay on it after knowing it. Both knowledge and adherence are fruits of God's guidance, care, and mercy. Turning to God for this matter stems from the belief that He alone is the helper. This matter is the greatest and foremost thing a believer seeks help from their sustainer for. Guidance to the straight path guarantees happiness in this world and the hereafter with certainty. It essentially means guiding human nature to God's law, aligning human actions with the entire universe in its journey towards God, the sustainer of all worlds. The Surah clarifies the nature of this straight path, the path of those who have received your grace, not the path of those who have incurred your wrath, nor those who have gone astray. It is the path of those who have been granted God's grace, not the path of those who knew the truth, but deviated from it, or those who never found the truth and went astray. It is the path of the blessed, the rightly guided, and the successful. This is the chosen surah for repetition in every prayer, without which no prayer is complete. Despite its brevity, it contains those fundamental concepts of Islamic perception and the emotional orientations arising from that perception. In Sahih Muslim, It is narrated from Al-Ala bin Abdurrahman, from his father, from Abu Huraira, who reported that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, God, the Most High, said, I have divided the prayer between myself and my servant into two halves, and my servant shall have what he asks for. When the servant says, all praise is due to God, the sustainer of all worlds, God says, my servant has praised me. When he says, the most merciful, the most compassionate, God says, my servant has extolled me. When he says, Master of the day of judgment, God says, my servant has glorified me. When he says, you alone we worship and you alone we ask for help, God says, this is between me and my servant shall have what he asks for. When he says, guide us to the straight path, the path of those who have received your grace, not the path of those who have incurred your wrath, nor those who have gone astray, God says, this is for my servant, and my servant shall have what he asks for. Perhaps this authentic hadith, after understanding the context of the surah, reveals one of the secrets of its selection for repetition by the believer 17 times a day and night, or as many times as one prays to God.